Good evening. Welcome to the December 6th meeting of the Oshkosh Advisory Park Board meeting. It'll be, a little bit short agenda tonight, so not quite all of the usual. Make sure you're on mute. If you want to speak, raise your hand. Let Stacy know, so we'll all keep an eye on who needs to go. And with that, Stacy, do a roll call.
All right. Bartelt, Davis.
Here.
Dearth, Royal.
Here.
Hudak. Here. Martin.
Here.
Metz.
Here.
Millet. And Palmieri. And then Schellinger.
Here.
All right. Moving on to the November 8th minutes. Are there any questions, concerns, changes that need to be made? All right, if there aren't any, then I'll make a motion to approve the November 8th minutes.
This is Deb, second.
All right, so motion to approve the minutes. Bartelt, Davis, Dearth, Royal.
Aye.
Hudak. Martin.
Aye.
Metz.
Aye.
And Schellinger.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passed 6-0.
If you don't have any citizen statements, you should be good. And we're moving right into new business. Right? If you want to update us on what's going on.
Sure. I think I did a fairly lengthy job of explaining in my memo, but the item is to discuss or recommend 2022 Parks Department Capital Improvement Program projects to potentially defer. Reason why this is on the agenda is back on November 9th, we opened the bids for the Four Seasons building at Lakeshore Park. Low bid came in at about $3.8 million. Next lowest was 4.4 million, and then the high bid was 4.6. We had identified approximately a $3 million budget for the project based on some proceeds left over from the sale of the property and some other projects. On Thursday, November 11th, we were contacted by the apparent low bidder requesting that we consider allowing them to withdraw their bid due to an error in the calculation of their bid. As they discovered an omission of costs that are associated with site utilities and some various building components. We requested some additional information from the firm and determined that it was an honest mistake, so their bid was withdrawn. So right now the low bid is the 4.4 million, which leaves the city about 1.5 million short in funding to provide or to proceed with the project. And I think if anybody knows material costs, obviously we're the big factor in this. We're seeing that steel prices continue to escalate. Wood prices are up and down right now. We're hearing that the wood prices were going to be going up again. So with everything going on, I guess we weren't too surprised the bids came in higher. We just didn't know how high they would be coming in. So on Tuesday, November 23rd, the Common Council discussed the building project and some potential funding sources for the approximately $1.5 million shortfall. In those discussions, the consensus of the council was they wanted to see the project move forward. It's something that they think would be good for the community. It's something that we promised the community as far as some development over at Lakeshore. So at that time, they directed city staff to work on identifying some potential funding sources outside of increasing the city borrowing for 2022. One of the projects that they had some brief discussion on that was included in our 2022 CIP was the Pratt Trail Road Reconstruction in Menomonee Park. They're also taking a look at some discussion of other city projects outside of our department, looking at maybe deferring some of those. And because it's affecting potentially mainly the Pratt Trail reconstruction project, the Common Council wanted to make sure the Parks Board was aware it was going on, because as you are aware, we send them a prioritized listing of our projects each year. So I listed the Parks Department projects that were funded in 2022. The Parks Admin Operations Building, our new facility. If you recall, when we were discussing the CIP, the council was looking to borrow over 3 years for that. The borrowing started in 21. They were going to do some more borrowing in 22 and 23. When they met during the budget sessions, they decided that they wanted to fund the 22 and 23 dollars in 22. They had various reasons for doing that. So in 22, they funded $5.1 million for our Parks Admin building, Menomonee Park Trail Road reconstruction for $1 million, Lakeshore Park development. This would include some trails in the west parking lot on the west side for $250,000. The Menomonee Park Beach Bathhouse, $150,000. Zoo improvements, which would be some security fence and path work for $100,000. West Haven Circle Park light replacement for $30,000, and then some park trail improvements for $25,000. So the list that I just read includes all the top priority projects that this board recommended the council back in June. And as I said, the council moved up the Pratt Trail Road reconstruction. If you recall, the board had recommended funding that in 2023 and 2024 at $500,000 each year. It was the council discussion. They wanted to see that project move forward a little sooner. So that was something they moved up to 22. And then the Lakeshore Park project for next year was reduced. We had originally proposed a project of about $1.3 million, and we applied for a DNR grant for 50% of that cost. We've been tentatively notified by the DNR that the grant that they can provide to us is $216,000 versus the $669,000 that we applied for. So what we need to do is reduce the scope of that project, and just we requested, I believe, we received $250,000 in Lakeshore Park development, and then we would have a matching the grant from the DNR for $216,000. So with the Four Seasons building coming in significantly higher than we anticipated, we are anticipating that our parks ops and admin building most likely is going to come in over cost or over budget as well. So that project we're scheduled for bidding in January, February. And so we'll know more probably in the next 2.5 months or so where the bids come in for that project. So as I'm working with the city manager and the finance director to try to identify some potential funding sources for the Four Seasons building, we're also being mindful of most likely having a shortfall for our parks admin building. So we're looking at ways that we may need to start planning for some additional funding for that. As I mentioned, the one project that the council discussed at their November 23rd meeting, they talked about the Menomonee Park Pratt Trail reconstruction, since that was one that they decided to move up from the originally proposed 23 and 24 borrowing. And that's again why we wanted to make sure that we brought something to the Parks Board, gave you a heads up, and wanted to make sure that you're part of that discussion. Since that meeting, I've been working closely with the city manager and finance director to try to locate some different funding sources. As I said, they're looking at some creative ways to fund it. We're looking at some potential projects throughout city departments that we may recommend to the council deferring. So we still have not identified the full funding, but we're fairly confident that we'll be able to fund it, the Four Seasons building, without affecting the Pratt Trail project right now. And so for us, I would suggest to this board that you may want to give some thought to and maybe recommend. We understand that Pratt Trail may need to be tapped in the future if the park admin building comes in higher, but we'd still like to see that project remain fully funded at this time if possible. And then if circumstances change in our park admin building, if we're able to get costs to come in at budget would be great. Then we would be able to remain with the Pratt Trail reconstruction project for 22 as well. So a lot of information, a lot of moving parts. But I'm more than willing to answer any questions. You know, as I take a look and as you take a look at the other projects that are approved in our 22 CIP, you know, we really can't suggest deferring the Lakeshore project because we have a 50% grant that's dependent on the city funding 50%. So that wouldn't be wise of us. The bathhouse, I'm continuing to work on some preliminary design concepts with that. And because we hopefully will have some public-private partnerships that might help us with that project, we'd like to probably retain some dollars for that project to move forward as well. Zoo improvements are something that Chad and I really feel this has been deferred for a couple of years. The security fence on certain areas of the zoo and some path work really need to be updated. And then you're talking, once we get into West Haven Park lights and trail improvements, you know, you're talking $30,000 and $25,000, which it's a lot of money, but it's not a lot of money when we're looking for 1.5. So I will take some questions or comments. Any thoughts that you might have? I see Scott wants it, Amy.
Just a question, does the CARES Act, any of that money the city received, is that a possibility for us using some of that leftover funds that haven't been earmarked for other projects yet?
There's ARPA funding, it's called, the rescue plan funding. And that is one of the potentials I think that the city manager and the finance director may look at. It'll be up to the council, but that may be one that they may be asked to consider. So potentially, yes.
This is Deb. I would just say that you've done a really thorough analysis of the whole thing. Wow. I mean, I'm very impressed with your careful consideration of all these things and why we need to do them. So thank you for that.
Sure. Like I said, there's a lot of moving parts. I will say that there's a number of other city departments that have come forward to the city manager and the finance director and offered up some potential projects saying we could possibly defer this if you needed funds for the Four Seasons building. So as a team, we're all trying to look at ways to get this project moving forward as the council said they would like to do. Any other questions or comments or thoughts? What are, I guess,
Scott, did you have something else, Scott?
Yeah, just to clarify, Ray, are you saying you're not really recommending delaying the Pratt Trail Road reconstruction?
I guess,
or that potentially will be used for any overages in the administrative building?
Yeah, I guess my suggestion, if the board's comfortable, would make to make a recommendation to the council that you'd like to retain or see the Pratt Trail project remain fully funded at this time. And if necessary, if funds are needed to help with the parks admin building, consider that at that time. Because like I said, it's going to take us about 2.5 months before we'll get the bids in on that project. So being optimistic, I'd like to say it's going to come in at budget, but I think we need to make sure the council knows, you know, we'd like to see Pratt Trail remain in there, but we understand that in 2.5 months, you may need to consider it. And at that time, that's where I think we'd be comfortable, or I would be comfortable recommending to the board. Because again, when you guys looked at the CIP, that project was moved into 23 and 24. That's when it was funded. So it's needed, it's necessary, and that's kind of where I would suggest you maybe consider going, I guess.
So what are the next steps then? So what are the next steps?
Yep. So if you're comfortable making that recommendation, basically recommend deferral of the Pratt Trail reconstruction at this time. And if funding for the parks admin building becomes necessary, considered at that time, is a type of a recommendation, I would say. And then what the council will be doing, as we put together the packets this week, I'll include some draft minutes from this meeting, letting them know the discussion we had. I'll include my memo that I provided to you, and then they'll have discussion next Tuesday and have some options, some funding options that the city manager and finance director will finalize. Because our bids that we opened on November 9th are good for 60 days. So by January 9th, we need to accept or deny the bids basically. And there's only one council meeting in December. So the council needs to make a decision at their meeting next week on the potential funding. So if they can agree to the funding at their meeting next week, then what we would do is we'll recommend awarding the bid, and the intent would be then for the contractor to begin work as early in spring as possible. Talking with the contractors, they felt they might be able to start breaking ground in mid-March if the weather cooperates, and then they'd be looking at potentially completing the project late next fall.
Wow.
Amy, did you have your hand up? I'm sorry.
Firstly, Becky's question, and I just wanted to clarify that at this time, we're not looking at deferring any projects, but looking for alternate funding sources.
That's what I'm working with the city manager and the finance director on, yes. Because the projects are part of your purview that you discuss every year. That's why we're looking at, if there was a project, do we want to offer it up? Or if there's a project, do we say, we will, but not right now?
Okay.
Or if necessary, I should say.
There's no one else to get bids from? Any other companies?
We'd have to deny or withdraw or deny all the bids and go through the process again. And our feeling is things aren't going to change. The material costs didn't come down. They probably went up from what we're hearing from some of the contractors. As we discussed it internally, if we were going to rebid the project, we would most likely rebid it this time next year. You typically want to bid these projects late in the year and over the winter months, because that's when people are bidding on projects for the following year. So typically you're going to get your best bids at this time of the year.
Okay.
Have any other questions or concerns?
Would somebody want to make a motion to do that?
I'll make a motion to move forward as you suggested, Ray. I think delaying it for another year to get bids, it's only going to increase the cost again. Same position next year, so hopefully the council will have enough information to make a decision on Tuesday.
So you want to recommend deferring, not to defer the Pratt Trail at this point, Scott? Is that as we kind of suggested?
Yeah, unless absolutely necessary for like the administration building project or whatever.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we're clear on how you want it stated.
Devin said that she will second the motion.
Any other discussion? If not, we could have Stacy take the roll. Stacy, if they're not here, you don't have to call them out.
All right, Davis,
Aye.
Groyle,
Aye.
Hudak. She's an aye. Martin,
Aye.
Metz,
Aye.
and Schellinger.
Aye.
Motion passed 6-0.
Excellent. That wraps up our agenda this evening. So I make a motion for adjournment.
Second.
This is Deb. I'll second.
All right. Once again, Davis, Groyle,
Aye.
Hudak, an aye. Martin,
Aye.
Metz,
Aye.
and Schellinger.
Aye.
All right, motion to adjourn passed 6-0. Thank you, everyone.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Take care.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Bye.